What a chaotic end to the summer Marcato. Nkunku, Rabio, and Odogu all coming across the line in the last day of the transfer window. And it has me asking a lot of questions on what types of profiles of players do we want? Because we brought in Nkunku for almost a record fee of 43 million. And you kind of look at the players previously we were linked with at that striker position: Vlahovic, Højlund, and Boniface. And now we land on Nkunku while having a Santiago Himenez on the bench right now. And I feel like all those names that I mentioned are all very different. Apart from maybe the Vlahovic, Boniface, and Højlund, those were kind of a target that I feel like Allegri really wanted. This management landed on Nkunku, who is a completely different player than those three. He's definitely not a striker that likes to play with his back to goal and kind of uses his body, to hold up play and everything like that. And I feel like this honestly maybe could have been a panic buy, in my opinion. And I feel like when you look at the Santiago Himenez situation, that this club clearly tried to force him out, in my opinion, right? It was like that swap deal with Dovbyk for Santi Gimenez. And I feel like it makes no sense because I feel like for me, Santi Gimenez has a lot more upside than a Artem Dovbyk. I feel like we know the sample size that Dovbyk is going to give us just based off of this season of Roma. And I feel like it's very underwhelming. I feel like if, Dovbyk scored at least like 20, 25 goals this season, okay, then we're talking about a different conversation. But for me, we just bought Santi Gimenez this February or this January, right? And, right, he's only played 3 months total for Milan on top of these games. And I feel like you're asking so many questions on why we're already trying to force him out after spending 35 million. By the way, that's a good chunk of change for a player like Santi Gimenez. And I'm still willing to, invest in Santi Gimenez. I'm still putting my stocks in Santi because I think that he can be a good player that Allegri can utilize and really morph into the type of striker that he wants. I feel like he can be a Vlahovic type striker or a Boniface or a Højlund type player. And I feel like we've seen what Santi can give us. And I feel like with just a little bit more time and a little bit more nurturing, I feel like Santi can really become a top player. And I mean, look, it's so clear that Santi wanted to stay. He was like, no, I want to stay. I don't want to move. And he's willing to fight for his spot here. And I feel like that alone is something that you can't buy, right? This player wants to stay and he wants to prove himself. And shout out to Matt Santangelo from That Milan podcast. I feel like he made a good point, whereas it's like Santi has such a big upside value in that alone, right? That trait of, wanting to fight for a spot and wanting to stay. I feel like that alone is more than enough to make him stay. So shout out to him for making that great point. And I feel like when you have someone like Nkunku, how is he going to fit in this system, right? Whether we play a 3-4-3, a 3-5-2, or a 4-3-3, whatever you want to say, I feel like how is he going to fit in this system? And it was very confusing because we totally just backed off of the deal from Boniface because he's not fit enough and he's injury prone and ACL and all this. When Nkunku alone has probably had more injuries and is more injury prone than Boniface himself. So you're asking questions on why we land on Nkunku, but we let Boniface walk to a deal for Werder Bremen. So very confusing on that front. But addressing the center back position, I feel like this was one of those positions that this management had to address to really make sure that we are a competitive squad. Yes, we got De Winter. Yes, we got Odogu. But we really needed an experienced center back, and we went for Akanji, but he totally denied us to go play Champions League football with Inter. And of course, this is the importance of qualifying for Champions League football. And you see exactly why players do not want to join us, because we're not in Champions League. And yes, we have a good project, and yes, we have, the pull, and we have the name and the history and this and that. But regardless of the fact is, this is the reason why players want to play at top clubs, because they play in the Champions League. And this was a position that we really needed to strengthen on if we're going to be running a back three formation, because respectfully, I am not confident whatsoever going into this stretch of the season, right, with a back three or just the 5 center backs of Tomori, Pavlovic, Gabia, Odogu, and De Winter. Not confident whatsoever with those 5 in the back, to be completely honest. So I feel like, of course, we still need to see a sample size from De Winter. We still need to see what Odogu can give us, but we already know what Pavlovic can give us, and we already know what Tomori can give us. And Tomori, he's a good player, right, when he on his day, but then he's just so inconsistent. And I really hope that Allegri can really channel that chemistry that this backline had in that stretch of the Scudetto season, right? 10 games, 2 goals conceded, 8 clean sheets. That is something that I feel like we'll never see for Milan ever again unless we get like a Maldini regen. But regardless of the fact is, with those 5 in the back, right, as our top center backs, I'm not confident whatsoever going into the season with them, to be honest. And I feel like, if anything, this transfer window has just been such a mixed bag of emotions. Just because in the last video, right, I mentioned that this was a good Marcato. I feel like out of 10, I think I said it was like a 7 or an 8 out of 10, right? Just based off of what we said. I said if we can get a top center back, then this will be a very good Marcato. But I feel like with us not getting a center back and with this Nkunku purchase that felt like a panic buy, especially because we missed out on all of our striker targets, Vlahovic, Højlund, and Boniface, all missed out on them, leaves me asking questions about how this squad is shaped up for this season. And the departures as well. There is only 9 current players on this roster that we hear from last season. 9, which is absolutely crazy. So the rest were sold off. Really begs a question on what direction this club is going in, with players who are going to develop here, who's going to stay next year, who's going to stay in 2 years. You know, is Pavlovic out the door? Is Estupinian going to be out the door? Is Ricci going to be out the door? So it's like you're really asking questions, because it's like we kept Reinders for 2 seasons, sold him for 50 million, which still boggles my mind. Now you're really asking questions, because we had Chukwueze, who is here, out the door. We had Musa here, who is here for, you know, a season or 2. So you're really asking questions on how are we going to develop players going forward in this team. And my impressions on the first 2 games is that we were a lot better in the second game, strictly off the fact that we kept a clean sheet and we won the game. But the play itself was not encouraging whatsoever. We had 2 disallowed goals. That one Rabio goal, I think, was a bit of bull crap in my opinion. Don't think it was a foul. I think it should have stood, but Santi gets on the score sheet, but it was offside, which would have been Modric's first assist. But he eventually gets that through the set piece, which is really good. And I feel like the takeaways that we can really take from this game is that our 2 best players on this squad right now, as we speak, without saying Leao, is Modric and Salamakers. And I'm sure Leao, it'll be a lot different, but hopefully he will be back versus the game in Bologna. But after this international break, I think Allegri is still trying to find his best team. What works, what doesn't. And I think with Rabio, I think he's a lock in the midfield. This is someone that Allegri wanted to bring in, and I feel like it's going to be a midfield trio of, I hope, Rabio, Modric, and Ricci. I feel like Ricci really needs to get into this team because of what we saw versus in preseason, what we saw versus Bari in the Coppa Italia. And I feel like going forward, I think we need to go with a 4-3-3. We need to go with, in my opinion, up top, we need to go Santi, Leao, and Pulisic. But something tells me that Santiago Himenez is going to get snubbed this season because this management clearly tried to force him out, right? Which is strange. Again, we bought him for 35 million, and in 8 months you already want to ship him out. So I feel like it's probably going to be Nkunku at that striker position, to be honest, to kind of link up play with the midfield and really have an emphasis on Leao and Pulisic scoring our goals this season. And I feel like the midfield trio, like I said, Rabio, Modric, Ricci, and then I feel like that back 4 needs to be Salamakers on the right, Gabbia, Tomori, and Estupinian. So I feel like that's something that I'll be really comfortable with going this season. But even with after keeping that clean sheet versus Lecce, this defense still gives me a lot of question marks and a lot of concerns because I still feel like even before we could have called up on a youth kid, you know, from the youth academy, right? A good solid center back to, you know, just throw in there. Giancarlo Simic, we had that in our youth academy and we let him walk. We let him go. And now we don't even have that insurance net to call upon someone from the youth academy. Odogu, again, is a huge question mark, only making very few appearances in the Bundesliga, but you never know. You never know his quality until we see him play. but I think this team might be suited better for a 4-back formation, in my opinion. I just think with that 3-back formation, it gives way too many leaks out the back. I feel like Pavlovic is so shaky. I do not want to see him in that back 3 at all. I don't want a back 3. I think this team is suited for a back 4. We saw it last season. Even if you go with a 4-2-3-1, I'd be happy with that. If you go with the double pivot of Ricci and Modric, or Ricci and Rabio, or someone. I think Rabio is such a lock in this team, and I feel like people are kind of downplaying this transfer, but I feel like Rabio, very good transfer. I made a joke to my friend that we're getting all the Juventus bums. We're getting Allegri, we're getting Rabio, we're getting Vlahovic. So, but regardless of the fact is, Rabio, for me, I feel like is a lock. We're getting a top quality player who knows the league and who is very close with the coach as well. And he's close with Mike Maignan. So I feel like that's something that really is going to play into favor for us. And I feel like Rabio is going to be one of those players that is going to be a big difference maker in this team. I think he'll be a lot better than Loftus-Cheek. I feel like Loftus-Cheek and Rabio are the same exact player, right? They're box-to-box midfielders, able to carry the ball. They're strong and they have good technical ability on the ball. So I feel like that's something that you can really look at for Rabio to really give us going forward. And I feel like with RLC, he gave us that. Loftus-Cheek did give us that, but it wasn't as a consistent basis as I think Rabio will give us, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think for this whole Rabio transfer to Milan. But I feel like there's been a lot of question marks with Estupiñán as well. For me, I'm still investing my stock in Estupiñán, to be completely honest. I feel like there's been a lot of negativity surrounding Estupiñán, but I feel like, yes, of course, there have been some questionable moments, but I feel like other than that, I feel like Estupiñán still kind of gives us what Teo would give us, and in my opinion, even more, right? But I feel like he is nowhere near as bad as Emerson, and I feel like he's nowhere near as bad as some of the other fullbacks that we've seen play for this club. And I really think that Milan missed out on having a good Marcato if we brought in an experienced center back, and we spent a grand total of 175 mil this transfer Marcato, and we sold 183 million worth of players. And imagine if Milan just spent, 50 to 60 million on very good players, on like 4 or 5 very good players, instead of buying 10 players for 20 million each, right? I feel like it would have really made ourselves competitive to the point where maybe we can start talking about the Scudetto, right? We're playing 1 game a week, and if we do bring in, let's say, an Akanji, and we bring in Vlahovic, and we bring in, another top midfielder, that would have really made us a top team to really qualify for Champions League, but also make a push for the Scudetto. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, what you guys think about this transfer Marcato, and what have your guys' takeaways been on these last 2 games for Milan. I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys check us out on all of our links in the description, Instagram, and all that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao ragazzi.